Well, hey everybody. My name is Zach. Thank you so much for clicking on this. Today we're talking God of War Ragnarok. This will be a non-spoiler review, but there will be a full spoiler review later next week probably. Once I get some more of my friends to finally finish talking, because I want to do like a podcast discussion on that, as well as God of War ranking will be coming later this week. But with that said, I got my Mjolnir right here from Thor. Got the Jotun Higher Edition or whatever it is, and I've beaten God of War. My most anticipated game for this year, for really much the last couple of years, ever since God of War 2018 had ended, and that game kind of changed everything for me when it came down to this franchise. I've always been a pretty big fan of God of War. I, love going back through these games, love playing as Kratos, ripping off gods' heads and killing them and smashing them to bits, and when it came down to God of War, the first three games I thought were spectacular, but my introduction to the God of War franchise was actually the original mobile game side-scroller. That was the first God of War I ever played in my life. And then I begged my parents to let me get God of War. They did, I played it, I loved it, and I kept playing it up until, the third one. And then I never really went back and played Ascension. I just thought, why are we going back in this story? I don't really care for that. Finally played Ascension this year. I actually thought it wasn't too bad, but the story was pretty lackluster. But now, back in 2018, that game changed everything for me, because the one thing that I've always had about Kratos is I don't care about him fully as a character. And when it comes down to button mashers and killing things and everything like that, it's always been a fun time. But my biggest thing against the game was it never really brought me in as a story. And maybe that's blasphemy for some of you guys people, but as a character-wise, the character was not there. I cared for him, I understood him, to a certain degree at least. 2018 makes me go back and revisit those games in a different capacity now. And now having God of War Ragnarok, that completely changes everything I've ever known about Kratos. And the things that we actually unveil and find out between him, Atreus, and their relationship as a father and a son is truly a magical. As you can see in the title and the thumbnail, this is a perfect game. Top to bottom, 10 out of 10. And I have a lot to talk about with this game. And, arguably, I think God of War 3, God of War 2018, and this are all 10 out of 10 games. I think they're perfect games, and you can go hand in hand on which one's the better one, but for me, when we have that conversation, this might be the best of them all. Well, I'll kind of decide on that once I finally do my ranking, but this game was truly everything I wanted it to be and more. So in today's video, we're talking God of War Ragnarok. Non-spoiler review. Again, I'm going to do my best to not spoil the game, but let's talk about it. This being Critics Play Games, thank you so much, you guys, for clicking on this. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as comment down below your guys' thoughts. Jumping into this right now, this game, truly enough, let's talk about the gameplay, because that's one big thing that I was actually surprised to see how much more was actually changed. Because God of War 2018 took a different perspective. It was going from the back of your back, not up top, not up down, any of that sorts of things. This was changing the perpendicular of how you play God of War, and it was kind of a refreshing change. Because even though the style of the camera was from the back point of view, as well as they were going with this one-shot take throughout the entire game, and they hold that to their own in Ragnarok, it really paid off and worked. And in this game, what they do is they actually bring some of the best elements from God of War 3 as well as God of War 2018 and mush them together. Now you start off with the Blades of Chaos. Now you have the axe, the Leviathan axe, and now you can use them hand in hand from the start of the game. And what does Kratos do? Kratos is very much more versatile from here. You see him from swinging from platform to platform in one big arena, slamming his Blades of Chaos into the ground, throwing someone at the wall, picking up another thing, doing something that they do in Mortal Kombat, where you find things in the map where you can use them to your advantage. You have Kratos doing that. So at one point, I'll stick the Blades of Chaos in a giant rock and just throw it at someone and completely one-hit them. It is utterly satisfying. But adding in there, along the way, the combos and the certain things you can upgrade with the RPG tree and all that stuff, which I don't think has always been super in-depth when it comes down to God of War games, and it doesn't really remain here, but I just love seeing that Kratos is like still versatile. I felt in 2018 he was very stiff and just very much just in his own, but in Ragnarok they really go as far to show, yes, this is the same Kratos from previous games, and it's awesome. And some of the finishers he actually does in here are finishers from the original God of War games, which made my heart sink and made me so happy. But with that gameplay said there, you know, there's some surprising elements in there. Some things that I actually was surprised that we didn't get to do. Some surprising elements that we do get in here, which actually became some of my favorite things for combat, but that does dive in the spoilers, so I don't want to dive into that too much, but I really dug that stuff. But revolving around that, and when you spin that around and you moved over to the next part of the entire thing, I come to this game for story. That is through in and throughout why I come to play a God of War game now. And just in general, why I dedicate time to playing a single-player game. If the story is not there, gameplay has to be like some of the best of all time for me to really get invested. Because I don't have a lot of time to play video games all too much. I try to make time, but, you know, as this is the channel about me talking about video games, I have another channel where I just dedicate talking about movies. And in the video game side, video games are like my favorite hobby in the entire world. So, hand in hand there, I love getting a good story. And 2018 was kind of like this emotional, subtle story between a father and a son. And what happens when the mother disappears and is no longer in their lives, and a father who is very reserved has to raise a son. And they have to take the mother's ashes to the highest peak in all the realms. That unimaginable feeling that of loss, and then also having to raise someone, completely one of the things that was very surprising to me. What I was really surprised with to see in here was to see that continue, but to see it continue in such a gratifying way. The second this game opens, it's clearly been a couple years. Atreus is way older, but I got tears in my eyes multiple times throughout this game. Not for like the pure emotional experience that you would think that happens in, like, say, The Last of Us Part 2, but looking at Last of Us Part 1, one of the most beautiful parts about that game is when Ellie and Joel pet the giraffe. And what I love about God of War Ragnarok is as big and bombastic as the story can get, because it's pretty much them and Ragnarok happening in Asgard. And you have Odin to deal with, Thor, and a couple other people that are quite surprising to see in here that I did not expect at all. But when you have all that to deal with, what I was worried about in getting in this game was that it wasn't still going to contain that smaller, subtle story that we got in the first God of War 2018 about a father and a son. And what surprised me the most was that God of War Ragnarok actually continues that and gives us even more moments like that. There was times where I was getting like teary-eyed and I was like, you go, Daddy Kratos. Like, I was so happy for Kratos because I went through his entire journey through those first 3 games and saw how much his anger and how he lost everything in his life. And to see his journey finally come up to this point was one of the most gratifying and exciting things that I've ever seen in gaming in the last few years. This is one of, if not the best, like, it's the best PS5 game, hands down. But when it comes down to actual gaming, I mean, you guys know my favorite game of all time is The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. Put those together, that's one big game for me. It's hard for me not to argue that this is as good as those games. And that's taking a lot for me to say. And again, this is going to hold upon replays and how do I feel going down in the future. But I just watching this, those smaller moments were so important to me and about emotional depth, and it felt like a damn journey that I was going on. And not even just the ones that you see in cutscenes per se, but the ones that you just have exploring. This game is actually really important within side quests. I did not do it much of the side quests in 2018. And a lot of that was just because I did a couple and I was like, this is kind of boring. I don't really care. Where in 2018, the second I started doing this game, it was like Mimir said, hey, who Mimir is great in this game, like, as not just an advisory or the smartest man alive, like, his relationship with Kratos and Atreus and kind of the friendship that works there, and really much even Brock and Sindri and the other characters that you meet along the way, there is true friendships forming in here, and you can kind of see, like, where Kratos maybe was annoyed with some people in the first game, he's actually kind of opened up to be friends, he's opened up to this world, he's opened up to family again, and I love that. And I love just the small conversations that they have, like with Mimir or a couple other characters actually finding out about, hey, like Kratos, tell us about your past, and him actually getting into it, him discussing those things was some of the most awe-inspiring things that I loved were just those small conversations. There's one conversation that I don't know if everyone's going to get this one, but I did a side quest with Kratos and Atreus. And, you know, for a majority of this game, Kratos is like, I'm going to follow your path. Now, there's reasons for why he wants to follow Atreus' path. But there's one side quest we do where Atreus wants to do it. And in 2018, Kratos probably been like, fuck you. I do not want to do this. But he opens up. He does it. And Atreus is like, I'm still confused on why you're doing this. And Mimir says, because all he wants to do is just spend time with you. Oh, broke my heart, ripped it out. And there's, again, so many moments like this that in the spoiler podcast, we are going to talk a lot about this. But there's a moment in the beginning where, like, you actually see Kratos smile. You actually see him smile through a lot of this. But you see the love that he has for his son, and you see the love that his son has for Kratos. And to see Kratos finally get that love, to open back up to that, was one of the most heartfelt things that I've ever seen. And while, again, that is my favorite aspect of this entire game, is that heartwarming content that really just warmed my heart up in every single way, the thing I was most surprised about, again, was continuing that story, continuing to see where Kratos went, and continuing to get all this exciting elements. And I just can't believe they actually did that, because it could have been very easy for them to go, okay, we gotta top God of War 3, because I'll still say this. I don't think they topped the God of War 3 boss battles in this. There are some that rank above some of the best of all time in this franchise. And even moments that when I think about, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty fucking cool. But even getting those moments, this is the best story that's ever been told in God of War. And talking about the bigger moments, which again, I was surprised to see how much more subtle and smaller space this game was, because that's not what I was expecting, but it was something that I was so welcoming to, because I was worried it wasn't going to be about in this game, was, you know, Thor, Odin. They're major parts of this game, and, you know, Thor's been the one that's been mostly marketed, him and Freya as being the villains, and I really like, speaking about Freya, I don't want to get too much into her storyline, because that is, like, a major spoiler. Freya is awesome in this. That was actually one of the biggest worries. They said that she was going to be a major antagonist throughout the game. What they do with Freya is one of the most beautiful things in this game, and really much relates back to Kratos himself before we met him in 2018, and everything that we'd seen in that original trilogy and everything now. Love that. Thor, really surprising character, and just to show again this awesome fucking hammer. This thing's actually really cool. I was kind of worried about how this would be, but like this collector's edition, which I did an unboxing of, was pretty damn sick. But what they did with Thor was actually interesting. They gave him a little bit more development. And same thing with Odin. Odin is not Zeus. He's not Zeus from God of War 3. He's not Zeus from the original trilogy. He is a very different character. And that can go as far as say that every single one of the characters you meet in here are different than what you would expect. And playing this actually made me pissed about like how Marvel's done the Thor franchise, because like they do Norse gods so well in here, and the build up and all sorts of things like that. Like there are definitely like, you'll see like in here like, oh, that character's in Thor, that character's in this, and the way they use them in this is just such a great interpretation of Norse mythology. I ate it all up. I loved it. Last but not least, Bear McCreary's score in here was just phenomenal. It was great in 2018, but it really continues to elevate each and every scene, and the performances in here are great. Again, this is as much as I can talk about without really getting into spoilers, but there's a lot of surprises to be had in this game. I think the gameplay is elevated to another degree. Where this game ends, I can't wait to see where it goes next. I think there's a lot of gratifying things, as well as an emotional ending that is not what you would expect at all. But it's one that I was very welcoming to. And I've seen some people get a little bit mad that the story kind of just, it's very smaller in its ending. But it reminds me of how 2018 ended. You get after done with that giant boss battle of Baldur, and you get this really emotional ending, and kind of the same thing here, but I actually think this ending was even more powerful, and I can, again, not wait to see what they do with certain characters going forward. I can't wait to see what they do next within this entire world, and I think overall God of War Ragnarok ends an amazing story with one set of things and continues in another set of things, and that's as much as I can really say. So with all that said, I'm going to give God of War Ragnarok a 10 out of 10. Let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are. Did you guys enjoy this game? Did you like God of War Ragnarok? Were you disappointed by it? Let me know down below. It is a safe space here. Just please don't come and attack me about my opinion. Just respect what we can, as well as make sure to look out for that God of War ranking coming out later this week. I'm very excited to talk about God of War. Because, yeah, I'm replaying them all this year. So thank you so much again for watching this, guys. But, of course, until next time, stay classy.